At 6:14 local time, the surface search radar aboard the USS George Washington updates. 8 contacts appear almost at the same instant. Beneath the decks, steel vibrates with a steady rhythm as the carrier holds her line. The sea is calm. Visibility stretches without limit. No sirens, no dramatic soundtrack, only the measured pulse of a ship doing exactly what it was designed to do. On the bridge, the watch officer leans closer. Bearings scroll across the display. Speeds fill in. These contacts are not simply drifting, they are taking shape. The Combat Information Center confirms it. Multiple surface contacts, formation tightening, range closing. No one raises their voice, no one needs to. At 6:16, the contacts increase speed, not all at once, in sequence. 2 move forward, 4 spread wider, then begin sliding inward. 2 remain behind, matching the pace. A wide fan starts folding toward the carrier's path. Closest point of approach updates, then updates again. The carrier does not alter course. A deck camera pans across the horizon. Long lenses settle on gray hulls, carving white wakes through the water. Their outlines sharpen. Low profiles, compact superstructures, naval paint bright enough to catch the morning sun. Bridge-to-bridge calls go out in English first, then Spanish. No answer. The radar picture redraws, and the pattern is now clear. This is no ordinary shadowing. This is an attempt to close the route ahead. At 6:19, CIC labels the lead pair. Track Sierra 1 and Sierra 2. Their motion vectors run directly across the carrier's bow. Log everything, the captain says, calm and level. Maintain course and speed. The order passes through the ship like an electrical current. Helm steady, engines unchanged, cameras rolling. Every change in bearing is time-stamped. Every knot is recorded. Aviation control clears the deck, not to send aircraft up, not yet, only to be ready. Rotor blades remain folded, tie-downs are checked. The ship settles into quiet preparedness. Another radar refresh. The outer 4 contacts tighten their arc. The inner pair move closer, narrowing the open water in front of the carrier. Their wakes begin to overlap, crossing in sharp white lines just ahead of the bow. Closest approach drops below 5 nautical miles. At 6:21, electronic support measures pick up emissions. Low power, surface search type, not targeting grade, but not passive either. They have us on sensor, the EW officer reports. There is no visible reaction on the bridge. The carrier keeps her course. On one of the escorts, a 5-inch mount rotates slightly. Not enough to escalate, enough to be noticed. A faint mechanical movement carries across the water. In response, the Venezuelan hulls tighten again. Visual identification confirms the markings. Venezuelan Navy. 8 vessels. Mixed classes. Lightly equipped. Fast enough to matter. The geometry keeps compressing. 2 bows angle in from port. 1 approaches from starboard. The rest hold the line across the front. At 6:23, closest approach falls to 3 miles. Time to CPA is now measured in minutes. A camera feed shows crew members on one of the approaching ships moving toward a forward station. Helmets on. No station is fully crewed yet. The bridge remains quiet. Helicopter crew, stand by, the captain says. Not a command to lift off, a command to be ready. The sea remains calm, and that only makes the moment feel sharper. At 6:25, the lead Venezuelan ship increases speed again. Exhaust darkens. The wake stretches longer. Its bow turns harder toward the carrier's projected track. Intent is assertive, CIC reports. No drama, no extra words, just the fact. Another bridge-to-bridge call goes out. Again, there is no reply. The carrier's bow continues forward, steady and unblinking. 40,000 tons of steel hold the line. CPA recalculates under 2 miles. For a moment, the entire formation seems to pause inside the same breath. 8 hulls, 1 lane, almost no room left. Then the log captures a detail that will matter later. At 6:26, the Venezuelan ships stop increasing speed. At first, the change is almost invisible. A knot here, 2 knots there, wakes shorten, angles soften. It is not a withdrawal. Not yet, but the wall begins to loosen. The captain watches the plot and says nothing. The carrier continues forward, steady as a metronome. 8 Venezuelan naval vessels remain ahead, still close, still positioned across the route, only not quite as tightly as before. The moment has not ended. It has simply changed shape. At 6:28 local time, the formation shifts again. The Venezuelan vessels do not pull away. They reorganize. 2 slide outward, widening the gap between them. 4 hold the center. The remaining pair drift aft, pacing the carrier's speed with unsettling precision. It is no longer a wall, it has become a funnel. On the bridge of the USS George Washington, the track display refreshes again. Vector arrows shorten, relative bearings pull tighter. New intercept solution, CIC reports. Multiple blocking axes. No one asks for an explanation. Everyone already understands. The carrier holds her heading, moving at more than 20 knots with disciplined, controlled momentum. Every decision is documented. Every possible response is measured against rules written long before this morning began. At 6:30, the inner 4 Venezuelan ships make a coordinated adjustment. 2 angle across the carrier's projected path. 1 eases to starboard. 1 remains directly ahead. Their wakes cross and overlap, drawing a white grid across the blue surface. It is deliberate, precise, built to force a decision. The carrier refuses to give one. Another bridge-to-bridge call is sent. The result is the same. Silence. The optics team tightens the zoom. Hull numbers are clear now. Deck details. Crew silhouettes moving with purpose. Binoculars raised on distant bridges. No systems aimed. No signal flags raised. Only steel, movement, and intent. At 6:32, closest approach drops again. Under 3 miles. Time to CPA. Less than 4 minutes. The outer pair of Venezuelan ships increase speed, then settle into matching pace. They are not rushing forward. They are guiding the shape of the formation inward from both sides. Recording all emissions, EW reports. Low-level radar sweeps continue. Still not a targeting signal. Still enough to note in the log. On the escort, the forward mount shifts again with the smallest mechanical correction. A fraction of a turn. A reminder, not an escalation. The Venezuelan ships respond by drawing their arc even tighter. On the flight deck, a helicopter crew climbs aboard. Rotors still, power off, helmets on. This is readiness, not provocation. At 6:34, the lead Venezuelan ship cuts slightly across the carrier's bow. Not close enough to make contact, close enough to remove open water from the picture. White foam bursts from its stern as it corrects, holding position just forward of the carrier's projected line. The message is clear. The lane is closing. CPA now 2.2, CIC says. No drama, just numbers. The captain watches the plot. He does not look out at the sea. The sea is not the deciding factor now. The math is. Another Venezuelan ship mirrors the move from the opposite side. The gap ahead narrows into a corridor measured not in miles but in ship lengths. The carrier does not slow. At 6:36, the trailing pair of Venezuelan ships drift closer, reducing the lateral spacing. They are adding depth behind the front line, making sure there is no clean route through. 8 hulls. 1 moving reference point. The carrier. Bridge-to-bridge calls go out again. English, Spanish, calm, professional. No response. Ahead, the wake patterns turn chaotic, crossed, layered, and deliberate. The water tells the story, even when the radios do not. Intent remains blocking, CIC reports. Formation disciplined. At 6:37, something changes. One Venezuelan ship hesitates for a moment. Its speed drops by a single knot, barely noticeable unless you are watching the data. The others do not follow. The formation remains intact, but the symmetry is no longer perfect. A narrow seam appears, faint, brief. The carrier continues forward. At 6:38, the seam widens, then closes again as another Venezuelan ship moves to cover it. A fast correction, almost automatic. They are testing the response, measuring reactions, waiting for the carrier to yield. She does not. The deck camera shows the bow cutting through reflected sunlight, steady and unchanged. No course adjustment, no speed reduction. Decades of naval doctrine expressed in one simple action. Forward motion. CPA ticks down to 2 miles. Time stretches, distance shrinks. 8 ships continue shaping the water ahead, their wakes carving lines meant to pressure, contain, and control. The carrier answers with silence and movement. At 6:40, the helicopter crew receives the call they expected. Stand by to launch. Not yet, but soon. The moment is approaching. The line is thinning. The numbers are becoming harder to ignore. Ahead, 8 Venezuelan naval vessels hold their positions. Still blocking, still pressing, still waiting to see what comes next. At 6:42 local time, the numbers harden. CPA drops below 2 nautical miles. Inside the Combat Information Center aboard the USS George Washington, the plot settles into something unmistakable. 8 surface contacts, all within maneuvering distance, all moving with clear purpose. Time to CPA, 3 minutes, CIC reports. No one repeats it. On the bridge, the captain studies not just the current display, but the track history, the pattern, the course changes, the speed adjustments, the way the Venezuelan ships are shaping the water instead of merely occupying it. This is the line, he says. Quiet, final. The order moves instantly. Helicopter, launch! On the flight deck, the chocks come away and the tie-downs are released. The rotor starts turning slowly, then faster, its beat building into a steady pulse that rolls across the water. The helicopter rises cleanly, nose slightly down, staying low as it gains speed. No display, no drama, just a clear presence. At 6:44, it passes over the bow and settles a few hundred feet above the surface, angling toward the tightest point in the Venezuelan formation. Camera feeds switch. The helicopter's optics lock in, sending high-resolution imagery back in real time. Hull numbers, deck crews, bridge windows, movement on deck. The Venezuelan ships hold their formation. One of the inner vessels increases speed again, moving deeper into the narrowing corridor ahead of the carrier. Its wake spreads wide across the water, cutting directly over the carrier's projected path. CPA recalculates 1.6 nautical miles. The helicopter closes the distance. At 6:45, a green marker light appears. Not an attack, not a provocation, a clear visual signal. The beam settles on the Venezuelan ship's bridge windows, steady and impossible to miss. It tracks smoothly as the helicopter holds position forward and slightly offset, far enough to remain safe, close enough to be understood. A radio call follows, calm and exact. Venezuelan naval vessel, this is United States Navy aircraft. Your maneuvering is unsafe. You are operating in international waters. Alter course immediately. The message is repeated in Spanish. For the first time, movement on the Venezuelan bridge is about more than navigation. Figures lean forward, binoculars rise. One crewman gestures sharply toward the carrier, but the ship does not turn. At 6:46, the helicopter widens its orbit, keeping the marker steady and the cameras running. Every second is recorded, time-stamped, and geolocated. Back in CIC, the electronic warfare officer calls the update. Radar emissions increasing, still surface search. No targeting lock. It is a narrow line, and everyone in the room understands that. The escort's forward mount rotates again, a few more degrees this time. Still silent, still only a signal. The motion is slow, deliberate, and clear enough to be understood from across the water. The Venezuelan response comes quickly, but it does not raise the situation further. Speed drops by 1 knot, then another. The lead ship's bow begins to drift slightly away from the carrier's line. The wake shortens, the white water softens. Contact Sierra 1 reducing speed, CIC reports. The helicopter adjusts, sliding sideways to maintain position. The green marker remains fixed. At 6:47, a second Venezuelan ship mirrors the change, easing back just enough to widen the corridor ahead of the carrier by 1 ship length. It is not a retreat, it is a recalculation. The remaining ships hesitate, their wakes lose symmetry. The formation flexes, no longer locked as tightly as before. The helicopter circles once more, slow and controlled, making sure every angle is captured. The message has already been delivered. There is no need to repeat it. At 6:48, a Venezuelan radio transmission finally breaks the silence. United States naval vessel, we are conducting patrol operations near our waters. It is not an apology. It is not a challenge. It is an acknowledgement. The captain listens without expression. The reply is brief and professional. This is a United States Navy warship conducting lawful transit in international waters. Your movements are being recorded. Silence returns, but the water tells the rest. At 6:49, the Venezuelan lead ship turns 2 degrees off axis. Barely noticeable to the naked eye, obvious on the plot. The corridor ahead of the carrier opens by another fraction. CPA begins to widen. CPA increasing. CIC reports. The helicopter climbs slightly, maintaining overwatch. The green marker light switches off. The cameras remain active. The carrier has not changed course. It has not reduced speed. 8 Venezuelan naval ships are still ahead, but the line has bent. And once a formation bends, it rarely holds the same way again. At 6:51 local time, the picture begins to settle. On the plot aboard the USS George Washington, vectors stretch out and bearings ease. The Venezuelan formation is still present and still close, but it is no longer tightening around the carrier's path. CPA widening, CIC confirms. Trend sustained. No celebration, no commentary, just acknowledgement. The helicopter holds a steady orbit forward of the carrier, offset to starboard, altitude unchanged. Its sensors continue streaming everything back in real time. Hull numbers, deck posture, wake patterns, spacing, movement. Every detail is tagged and stored. The green marker remains off. It has already done what it needed to do. At 6:53, the Venezuelan ships shift into parallel courses. 2 drop slightly aft. The inner pairs slide outward by roughly 1 ship length. What had been a barrier becomes a line. Still firm, still visible, but no longer directly closing the carrier's route. The radios stay quiet. The carrier maintains course and speed. On deck, the sound of rotor wash fades as the helicopter moves into a wider arc. The posture changes from direct pressure to observation, but the cameras never stop. Emissions down, EW reports. Surface search sweeps decreasing in frequency. No new signatures, no escalation. The escort's forward mount eases back by a fraction. Not fully neutral, just enough to reflect the shift taking place ahead. Everything remains visible, nothing is hidden. At 6:56, the Venezuelan ships make their first coordinated adjustment since the closest phase of the encounter. The change is small, but it happens across the formation, a synchronized reduction of 1 to 2 knots. Not a retreat, a reset. The carrier passes the former choke point without altering course. Ahead, the sea opens into clean blue water. The wakes begin to straighten. The crossed patterns fade behind them. CIC updates the log. Time, distance, bearing, speed, every number recorded. The helicopter climbs slightly, widening its field of view. From that angle, the Venezuelan ships are now clearly pacing rather than blocking. Their posture has shifted from control to presence. At 6:59, the radio remains silent. And that matters. In moments like this, silence after contact can say more than another call. The captain studies the trend line, not just the latest image. Then he gives a single nod. Continue transit. No qualifiers, no added explanation. The carrier moves on, steady and unhurried. 40,000 tons of momentum answering pressure with procedure. At 7:02, the Venezuelan formation begins stretching lengthwise. Spacing increases. The trailing pair fall farther astern. The forward ships drift another degree off the carrier's axis. CPA is now widening in miles, not shrinking in cables. The helicopter maintains overwatch for another cycle, then slides aft along the carrier's starboard side, keeping every contact within sensor range. This is documentation, not display. Nothing new, CIC reports. Pattern stable. On the bridge, no one is focused on the horizon. They are focused on the numbers, and the numbers say the same thing with every refresh. The situation is cooling. At 7:06, one final transmission arrives from the Venezuelan side. The tone is neutral, formal. United States naval vessel, Venezuelan ships are conducting routine operations. It is a message meant for the record. The reply comes immediately. Roger, we are continuing lawful transit. Nothing else is needed. By 7:08, the Venezuelan ships have settled into parallel tracks at a safe distance. Still visible, still present, but no longer controlling the carrier's path. The helicopter moves away into a holding pattern, cameras still running, sensors still listening. It will remain there until the separation proves stable across several updates. The carrier has not changed course, it has not adjusted speed, no one has raised their voice. What remains now is the record. Every bearing shift, every speed change, every signal, every second logged, time-stamped, and stored. As the distance opens, the sea begins to look orderly again. Clean wakes, open water, predictable movement. The encounter does not end with spectacle, it ends with documentation. And in this kind of situation, that is exactly the point. By 7:12 local time, the distance is no longer closing. On the tactical display aboard the USS George Washington, the tracks now tell a simpler story. 8 Venezuelan surface contacts remain in view, but their paths no longer cross the carrier's projected route. Parallel courses, safe spacing, stable movement. CPA holding, CIC reports, situation normalized. No one celebrates. Normal was always the objective. The helicopter continues its wide orbit. Sensors remain active. Cameras keep recording until the separation holds through multiple refresh cycles. Documentation does not stop the moment tension fades. It stops only when the pattern confirms itself. On the bridge, the captain reviews the log. Not only the final positions, but the sequence that led there. The acceleration points, the brief hesitations, the moment the formation bent instead of holding firm. That is where outcomes are decided, after the pressure, before the narrative. Nothing was released because nothing needed to be. The carrier never changed course, never reduced speed, and that matters. In maritime encounters, even a small deviation can be read the wrong way. It can look like concession, uncertainty, or an opening. Holding the line removes that ambiguity. The Venezuelan ships tested the space ahead. They shaped the water, they compressed the angles, they waited for a reaction. They did not get the one they wanted. What they did get was presence, measured, visible, and recorded. A helicopter low and steady. A green visual marker that signaled without escalating. A forward mount that shifted just enough to be understood. Radio calls that stayed calm and professional. Silence when silence carried more weight than words. This is not restraint as weakness. This is restraint as control. At 7:16, the helicopter returns to the deck. The rotors wind down. Sensors are powered off only after the final data packet is confirmed, received, and stored. The aircraft crew debriefs immediately, adding timestamps and observations to the record. Every detail matters, not for headlines, for consistency. The Venezuelan ships continue along their parallel tracks, widening the distance mile by mile. Their wakes now run clean and straight. No further course changes. No notable new emissions. The carrier continues her transit as planned. No escort breaks formation. No new orders are needed. At 7:20, CIC closes the event log. Not because the ships have disappeared, but because the behavior has stabilized. This is how encounters like this end when discipline holds. There are no warning rounds because that path brings unnecessary risk, confusion, misreading, and decisions that cannot easily be taken back. The absence of force is not passivity. It is a choice. The data gathered during the encounter now carries the weight. Radar tracks, speed shifts, formation changes, radio silence, and every recorded movement. It is objective. It does not argue. It simply exists. In modern naval operations, that record has power. It shapes future responses. It reveals patterns. It establishes credibility without a single round expended. By 725, the Venezuelan ships are no longer the dominant feature on the display. They are contacts among many, present, not pressing. The sea returns to routine. The carrier's bow moves forward. The horizon remains unchanged. 40,000 tons of steel continues through international waters exactly as authorized. No declarations, no victory speech, just transit. This is the part most people miss. The goal is not to win a single moment. The goal is to prevent the next one from becoming worse. Force was not used because it would have answered pressure with noise instead of certainty. And certainty came from math, geometry, timing, and control. As the distance keeps opening, the final entry is made. Encounter concluded, transit uninterrupted, no escalation. And somewhere behind the carrier's wake, 8 Venezuelan warships continue their patrol, now fully aware of where the line sits and what happens when it is tested. So the question remains long after the radar screens have cleared. In a moment like this, when steel closes on steel and the margin is measured in minutes, is holding course the stronger move? Or is it simply the only move that works?